Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another Film Fanatic show. It is Wednesday at 11 o'clock. Hope everyone's doing good. It's a beautiful day. We've had some killer weather, so it feels like it's finally spring. So, yeah. So, lately I've been doing lots of different videos. I've been trying to do, I'm always trying to bring some variety to the channel. So, I did like kind of a music experimentation video yesterday. And that was fun. It was, I've gotten some feedback from it, and it's been pretty cool. Like, as it was a new thing, I, um, I don't know. It was interesting because I've been doing music shows lately, and but also with movie release, new movies I've seen, and that's been really cool. I did a show on this Japanese movie House from 1977, which I was just completely blown away by. And that movie actually was a big kind of inspiration for me to do this little weird video I did. And I've been doing these music shows also, and some of the groups I've been covering have been kind of in the or some of the videos, some of the groups I've been talking about have been kind of in the noise music experimental realm. So lately I've been listening to a lot of that stuff, pretty out there kind of electronic experimental music, which I've always loved, but I've been digging into a little bit more. I got a bunch of really great albums in that genre recently down at this amazing record shop down in Portland, Oblivion's Sight and Sound, I think it's called. Amazing place down in Biddeford. So the reason that I did that video, the way it came about, or how it came about, was like I've been listening to a lot of this kind of weird experimental noise music, and some of it I really dig. And then I watched that movie House the other night, and so I woke up with this idea yesterday of I don't know trying to combine all of those elements, and I don't know, it was fun, and I'm gonna do I think I'm gonna do some more at some point down the road. I basically what I did was I did a little improvised set of music, and the noise element, the subgenre, the harsh noise, or the real, kind of outsider music. It's music I've always really loved. Growing up, I, you know, always had, some kind of, I've always had an appreciation for pretty outside music. Always I've always felt like I have a pretty good open mind to music and art, and even things that are pretty extreme and harsh. And so, I had always had a little bit of an appreciation, or had an appreciation for that music. And about 15 or 20 years ago, or about, yeah, 13, probably 13 to 15 years ago, I started going to lots of shows that were kind of in that realm. I was going to lots of house parties. There used to be a really cool couple that used to live here in Belfast, and they used to host these parties, and they'd have a lot of experimental music at these events. And then a band that I was in at the time, we would do shows. We had that kind of vibe too at times as an element in our music. But I got exposed to a lot of cool music, and since then I've always been really attracted to it. And that music definitely has a big influence on quantum. It's definitely a component. The harsher noise, experimental side of our music. I try to make our music really melodic, and I try to really have the focus be on melody. But that other element of where it's pretty outside the tradition of what we think of as music, I really appreciate some of that music a lot. And those elements have always been a big part of of our music. So what I set out to do was basically I just kind of recorded myself doing just kind of an improvised set with no real structure. The main thing that I wanted to do was to try to have it kind of minimalist. But then when I got to where I felt it was going to be towards the end, that there was going to be a real dynamic shift, meaning that everything would kind of come down and slowly dissolve. That was the only guidelines I kind of gave myself, and I just kind of winged it. And I recorded like 10 minutes worth of music, and I thought it came out pretty decent, and I just did it in one take. And then I wanted to try to put together like a little visual element with that. So that came, and that's how that video came across, or that's how that video came about. So it was fun, and I might do some more things like that. And technically, it's a quantum thing, but it's it's a new thing, where it's more straight up in that realm, even though that is a big part of our music. So, but anyway, today is going to be on a movie. I just watched this movie, or I'm in the midst of watching it. And I've seen this movie so many times. It's one of those movies I grew up watching, and I've seen it so many times. I've literally lost count, and I never get sick of this movie. I almost enjoy it more and more. And that is from 1987. Again, I think this movie is a classic thriller from the 80s. The iconic Fatal Attraction. I don't think I've ever done a video on this movie, but I have a really great. This is a DVD version of this film, and I think that this movie is such a classic 80s movie. I think it's one of the greatest kind of thrillers that's out there. It's about a romance and an affair. It stars Michael Douglas and Glenn Close. And Glenn Close, I think, plays one of the most deranged and one of the most terrifying characters I've ever seen on the big screen. This is a theme that's been explored a lot in films. People who are, well, psychopaths, and they go off the edge, they get obsessed with someone or something. But I think that this movie is one of the greatest tales of that, or portrayals of someone completely unhinged and becomes this insane stalker. And it's a terrifying movie. I mean, it really is. It's hard to believe this came out in 1987. This is a really, even though it would be awesome to get this on Blu-ray as an upgrade. I definitely need to get an upgrade of this. But this is a really good version, a really good edition of this movie. It's a collector's edition of this movie. I got this quite a few years ago. It was directed by Adrian Lyne. This movie was really kind of controversial at the time too, because of the sexual nature of it and how this movie is really fucking dark. I always forget how dark this movie is. And this was, a big budget, Hollywood movie, and it went to some pretty dark areas. And I remember seeing this movie the first time when I was a little kid, and it scared the shit out of me. It was like, I don't know, it's kind of like a cautionary tale of who you want to be intimate with, I guess, to a degree. And I remember somebody that I know pretty well had told me this really kind of funny or crazy story that they had this particular person has been married twice, and the second time, their first marriage, that the actually no, I should say this is his third marriage, but his first marriage that he had was really awful and really dysfunctional and messed up. And he told me that there was like I reached a point where he, kind of gave up, even though they were technically married and they were trying to forge through. They had kids, the two kids, which made things even more complicated. And the kids were pretty much babies at the time, and they were, basically at each other's throats. And he told me that he ended up having an affair on her. He ended up having this one night stand with a woman that he didn't really know, and and then shortly after that, he came home one day and Fatal Attraction was on television, and it scared the shit out of him even more. So, but again, this was directed by Adrian Lyne. This was 1987. It's hard to believe that this came out then. There's a really great special features component on this movie. There's a really great interview with Adrian Lin, the director, and there's there were I I mean I think this cut is pretty awesome, but the thing that's really cool about this, and I wish I don't know, it probably does exist. It probably actually exists in Blu-ray form or 4K form at this point. But there were quite a few scenes cut out of this movie. And without giving anything away, there was a very originally for Fatal Attraction, there was a very very different ending where kind of essentially, I mean essentially the theatrical version, which is this one, has I don't know, kind of a happy ending, if you will. Some people might think it's a little bit too cliche or a little bit cheesy, and which I can understand. I can kind of see that. And but the thing that's so awesome about this DVD version is there's a really great interview with the director Adrian Lin, and he goes in depth about the cuts that were made in this film because, and I believe it was due to studio pressure because this was a, I think this was, yeah, this was a Paramount release, you know, major studio, and this was a major kind of Hollywood blockbuster. It had a lot of money in it in the time. It had two major Hollywood stars, you know, Glenn Close and Michael Douglas. Michael Douglas at this time was, you know, in so many big blockbusters, as well as Glenn Close. So they were like superstar actors. And Paramount, so this was like a big, you know, Hollywood blockbuster. And I believe in the interview, Adrian Lin talks about kind of the pressure of making this film, and especially in regards to kind of tying up the story and the direct and the ending of the film, and you know, kind of the back and forth and kind of the war that existed, because the studios, you know, wanted this movie, even though, you know, with those cuts, this movie is still really, you know, super raw. It's super dark, pretty disturbing. They the studio kind of felt like it needed to, you know, have this, I don't know, more of a happier ending, you know, a little bit more of a resolve. But the original ending that Adrian Lin had intended for the film was not a happy ending at all, like actually super dark. And I wish it was included. I wish there was a cut, and and again, probably now there is a director's cut and then a theatrical version. But in all honesty, I love the ending that was cut out. I prefer that to the ending that was in the theatrical cut. I still think, as it is, it's still an amazing movie. But honestly, I think the original ending, I definitely prefer. It would have been awesome to have seen that because it's super dark and it is not a happy ending. But amazing film, really ahead of its time, super dark, and considering that this was again a movie that was a big budget Hollywood film, it definitely went into kind of that dark psychology of someone going completely insane. I have many memories of seeing this movie, and it always scared me. It always scared the shit out of me. And I remember seeing this film as a very little kid, and it just left this real kind of impression on me. I probably, well, maybe I saw it too early. I don't know. Maybe that's a big possibility. The other thing about this movie, this was like not only, I mean, the dark nature of this movie, and it really being a true tale of like, you know, unhinged obsession. You know, when I saw it, I was again a really young kid, but it was also the first movie I ever really saw that, you know, had graphic sex in it. You know, there's the famous scene of where Michael Douglas's character and Glenn Close, they are, you know, coming out of they work more or less they're colleagues and they work. He's a lawyer, a high powered lawyer, and she is also working kind of in the industry. She's working as like a publicist, and there's a case that's kind of pending that they're both kind of almost having to work on together, and she's like kind of representing the author who is possibly getting involved in this lawsuit. So they come together that way at this meeting after meeting each other randomly before at this kind of company party, and then they meet again at this formal kind of business meeting, and then they end up by chance meeting again where there's this whole big scene of where it's raining and Michael Douglas is standing outside the building trying to get a taxi, but his umbrella is not working, and it's he's getting drenched. And Glenn Close's character is outside, and she notices him, so then she goes over with her umbrella, and then they get a taxi, but then they end up going out for a drink, and then after that, melee ensues. And that's kind of the beginning of the end. And so, but there's a scene of where they go back to the to his house or to her house, and this like really graphic sex scene. And I remember that was probably the first time I ever saw like something really graphic and that was really intense as far as sex. And again, I think that was definitely one of the big factors as to why this movie was really controversial at the time because no other real big films, Hollywood films, were kind of showing sex in this way, and so that was a big thing, and I remember that that impression, with the darkness of this film, but then also seeing the sexual nature of it, and it was pretty graphic. And watching this movie now, it still like kind of pushes the envelope. It's a fantastic movie. It's one of the best thrillers I think ever made. And I always, every time I watch this movie, I always forget how how dark this film actually is, and it's just amazing. So I definitely need, and again, the year that it came out in 1987, which is wild, but I definitely need to get an upgrade of Fatal Attraction. It's a classic film, and to get it on Blu-ray would be super awesome. And I'm sure, like I said about the ending, the ending that was cut out. There were also other scenes cut out, but the big thing was the ending was significantly different. I'm sure there's a version of it, like a director's cut, which would be pretty sweet. But anyway, thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.